welcome to the Cook Memorial Public Library podcast, where we invite you to spend a few minutes with the staff at Cook Library. I'm Lindsay Barber Petticourt, and I'm here today with Nate, our emerging technologies librarian, and also one of our bookies, who you can go to for book, movie, and music recommendations. Today, Nate's here to talk to us about some of his favorites, so you can get a feel for why you might ask him for a couple of recommendations. So thanks for being on the podcast today, Nate.
Yeah, feels good to be here.
Excellent. So I actually wanted to start by asking you about movies, since you do a film podcast with one of your friends. Now, this is obviously kind of a broad question, but what are some of your favorite movie genres? I guess we'll start there.
Gosh, I probably like movies from almost every genre. I think I find with movies, the way I kind of approach what I like, it actually has more to do with maybe like directors. Mm-hmm. So I have like favorite directors, and a lot of those directors sort of dive into different genres. So like the Coen brothers would be like probably my all-time favorite filmmakers.
Okay.
But they have like a movie in every genre pretty much.
Right.
Whether it's like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, or Big Lebowski, or No Country for Old Men. And then there's like other directors Terrence Malick or Paul Thomas Anderson or Wes Anderson. Mm-hmm. These are all just directors that are pretty broad in what they do. But I guess if you had to look at similarities, I tend to like I like a lot of like historical drama type stuff. I like a good comedy, and I like stuff often that's pretty epic. Either epic in scale or epic in like sort of these sweeping character kind of studies, I guess.
Well, since you have a couple of favorite directors, you have to have some favorites that they've directed. Are there maybe a couple of favorites you want to share with us?
Sure. Well, I mentioned the Coen brothers.
Right.
I always, if I'm forced to answer my favorite movie, I tend to say Big Lebowski. Because it's the one that I can kind of pop in at any time and just get a good laugh and enjoy myself. And it's also just sort of a quirky enough movie. I tend to like really quirky things as well, just sort of a unique sense of humor. So my other favorites, like I love like some darker stuff like There Will Be Blood from Paul Thomas Anderson. I love the Royal Tenenbaums is one of my all-time favorite movies from Wes Anderson. My favorite from Terrence Malick, it's really a toss-up between like Tree of Life and Thin Red Line, probably.
Okay.
But I mean, I think that kind of makes me sound like I only watch like prestige pictures, which is not really quite the case. Like one of my all-time favorites would be like Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Okay.
And, I enjoy a good popcorn flick as well.
Right. Who doesn't?
One of the things I actually kind of look for that I've realized will make me gravitate towards certain movies or have lingering memories of movies is the music in the movies or the soundtracks. So often, especially with even a lot of the ones that I just mentioned, it's often the soundtrack that I will kind of grasp onto, and then I can listen to it over and over again, and then sort of the movie sort of becomes something else within me, I guess. Like,
right.
I that's another thing I just really like movie soundtracks and movie scores.
That makes sense.
If you look at the directors I mentioned, they all do interesting things with music.
They do. It's very important to their films.
Yes, like especially Wes Anderson. Like he specifically chooses each song for each movie. Paul Thomas Anderson has, over the last few movies, worked with Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead for all of his soundtracks, which have a very kind of, almost manic kind of orchestra feel to them.
Yes. Yes, they make you feel a certain way.
Yeah, like kind of like what Kubrick films used to do, just this very horrific way of using an orchestra. Yeah. Right. I think that marriage of sound with with music in film is kind of what makes film more unique than a lot of other mediums, is that it really does incorporate other mediums to sort of, it's kind of like a director will use whatever tool they have available to make you feel what they want you to feel.
Right. And
sometimes it's music, sometimes it's the way the camera works, sometimes it's the way the actors are acting.
Right, because it's a visual and an audio medium. You have a lot of tools.
Yeah.
So, in addition to movies, you also do like to read. What are some some of your maybe go-to authors or go-to genres for books?
Books, I'm a lot more scattered on. I'll read, if someone says that they think I'll like something and the brief synopsis sounds interesting, I'll probably give it a shot, But it's funny that the authors I go to, a lot of them are dead. So I like to read a lot of times I'm reading like older books, like Flannery O'Connor is one of my favorites. I do like a good short story. So Flannery O'Connor, Graham Greene is another one. Kurt Vonnegut wrote relatively short books, which I liked. So I tend to like shorter books, but books that are short yet have a lot of like denseness to them. Like they're usually, I don't actually need like a really fast-paced, plot-driven book at all.
Okay.
I'm fine reading a more meditative, sort of character-driven.
Something to sit with for a while.
Yeah, that's kind of where reading sits with me. I don't go to books necessarily for that type of popcorn entertainment, I guess. Like I go to books when I want to kind of just sit with ideas a little bit more.
Right.
So the authors, living authors, I think George Saunders is one of my favorites.
Right.
Who just wrote Lincoln in the Bardo, his first full-length novel.
Right.
And Marilyn Robinson is another one of my favorites, who wrote Gilead and Lila. And these they're much quieter types of books.
Right. Kind of quiet books. Yeah.
So, I guess going along closely with reading for me as being kind of a more thoughtful type of thing. And so, if you're looking for a very boring book recommendation, come see me. No,
no, just a specific type of reading.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. I find learning new things entertaining. Like that is entertainment to me, is like, when I can learn something new. And so I actually do read a lot of nonfiction as well. I tend to read a lot of American history.
Okay. Are there any nonfiction books that you've recently read that you highly recommend?
I don't think I recently read it. It's been a while, but one of my all-time like favorite nonfictions that kind of just like I wasn't expecting to be as good as it was Destiny of the Republic by Candace Millard. It's actually one of our book club picks.
Oh, okay.
But it's just a book about the assassination of James Garfield.
Oh, okay.
But the level of, just really weird facts in that is really quite something. First of all, James Garfield would have been actually probably a pretty interesting, good president. He never really had a chance.
Right.
And then he's just kind of shot by this guy who was kind of insane, like actually mentally insane. But the book really goes into medical practices at the time and how his gunshot wound really wasn't that bad. And he probably would have lived if only American doctors were practicing what the Europeans already were practicing in medicine, and how they just kept sticking stuff into the hole he ended up just dying of infection.
Right.
And back then, like, germs were still kind of a hocus pocus thing.
Okay.
So a lot of the book deals with like medical practices. It also deals with like how Alexander Graham Bell developed one of the first kind of metal detectors as a way to try to figure out where the bullet was without having to stick all these like instruments into you to find it. So it goes into a lot of different interesting places, and again really does give you this idea of like what it was like to be alive at that time, like ways that you don't think are different now. You don't think about.
Right. Yeah.
And it has that presidential spin on it. So it was kind of like a book tailor-made for me, I think.
Right. Yeah, that sounds quite fascinating, actually. I might have to add that to my to-read list. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast, Nate.
Thank you for having me.
So if you would like to get a movie, book, or music recommendation from Nate or any of our other bookies, visit our site at www.cooklib.org/bookies and fill out a form. While you're on the website, don't forget to also visit Shelf Life, the library's blog, where we share what's new and interesting in books, movies, and music. The blog's address is shelflife.cooklib.org. If you want to get in touch and leave some feedback, send a message to us at webmaster@cooklib.org. Also, if you enjoyed this podcast, keep spreading the word, and if you can, leave us a rating on iTunes. We'll be back soon, but until then, keep reading, keep watching, and keep listening.